taxi drivers have allegedly attacked and burnt cars belonging to Bolt and Uber drivers outside Maponya Mall in Soweto. Two cars were set alight last night. The motive for this incident is unknown, but tensions have been running high between the transport operators.
Yeah, in video shared on social media overnight, one of them on your screen, gunshots can be heard while some people appear to be assaulted. Newzroom Afrika has reached out to police, but we're yet to get a response. Nonetheless, let's get you a sense of what else we might know. Bring in e-hailing spokesperson Batuka Mbelengwa, who joins us via our video link this morning. Great to see you, sir. Thanks for making time. What happened?
Good morning. I think essentially what happened is what has been happening. We have our government which has failed to create a healthy ecosystem within transportation where the different participants can complement each other instead of compete with each other. Now, as a failure of government to deploy a price-determining instrument within the e-hailing industry, the Bolts and Ubers of this world have undermined the traditional transportation industry, the traditional taxi industry, and the pricing is set to compete directly with that segment of public transportation, which makes no sense. And hence you are seeing these violent attacks because our government has simply failed to intervene. It's been a decade. I've been at the front line of having these dialogues on Newzroom for many years now. And there's no reason as to why government has not deployed efficient interventions to make sure this violence is eradicated. And then there's a healthy transportation mix in which all can participate in a safe manner.
Yeah, for sure. That's the kind of macro context, the conditions that led to the tensions that unfolded in Soweto. Granted and very important. But do you know the exact circumstances around what might have happened there? Because part of the facts that we have at our disposal is that there were two specifically Bolt drivers who were attacked, but it's still unclear by who.
Yes, it will never really be clear. The general assumption will be the local taxi players that sit at the rank there. But I'm very cautious as to want to then blame somebody or identify an assailant. I would leave that to law enforcement. I can tell you to, however, expect more eruptions like this all over the country. The frustration of the transportation industry or the taxi industry is going to gain expression through such acts over the next few weeks. And I think all participants should be just more alert and be safe.
Sure. Issues around regulation of the industry itself, as you mentioned, are certainly not new. And the interventions by government don't seem to have worked. In the absence of that, do you reckon that there is some kind of space, perhaps an environment, for the role players to have conversations on the ground, so to speak, at the very least for the benefit of commuters who rely so heavily on all the different modes of transport?
I think it's important and it's actually critical that the role players do have a conversation. I think we need to deploy people to the front line who are willing to ensure that a solution or we find a solution that serves society holistically. Right now, the dialogues we've attempted to have are always undermined by some kind of dominance or somebody wanting to be acknowledged as a superior power, and therefore the dialogues then do not gain momentum. I also feel that the ruling party, the governing party, lacks the creativity and insight to be brazen enough and bold enough to deploy an effective solution. I think we need to be given the space as young people with creative ideas to have dialogues within a safe environment so that we can deploy these solutions. We have for years advocated for regulation, and we are able to display and make actual recommendations on how we believe this regulation should therefore be rolled out. The concept of regulation isn't new. We have many very heavily regulated industries within this country, but historically regulation protects big capital. And, you know, the ordinary man who's gone out and buy a car to work on a platform like Uber and Bolt is not protected. And it's also important to note that, you know, part of the regulation we've recommended is influx control. Now, you're getting people losing their jobs, retrenchments are at a high, and everybody seems to believe that they can find an income in e-hailing, and this is not the reality. You know, this industry has bankrupt people, they've lost money, and whatever savings they have, if they're going to put it into a vehicle that's going to work in e-hailing, I can guarantee you that's going to be a waste of an investment because there's too many participants coming to the e-hailing space. It's not regulated.
Yeah.
The supply and demand ratio is, you know, there's no control over it. And that's primarily because e-hailing companies bear no consequences in these kind of failures. They don't get blacklisted, their cars don't get repossessed, they don't face the violence on the streets. So they're not sufficiently motivated to ensure that they control participation.
Sure.
They ensure that the pricing is correct.
I hear you. Yeah, it's about security of tenure ultimately. Please stay on the line, Vatuka, if you can. I want to bring in Bafana Makakula, who speaks for Santaco, who joins us now via our telephone line. Bafana, I'm sure you've been listening in to Vatuka paint a picture around the context.
Good morning, Brian, and good morning to my brother from Uber or Bolt there.
Okay, thank you for making time. I'm sure you've been listening to what Vatuka has been saying. Reports suggest that taxi drivers may have been behind the attack of those Bolt drivers in Soweto. Can I just get a response from you on that? Do you know if your members were involved?
Look, first time I heard this was this morning when Newzroom called me, and we were not aware of any incidents of this nature. And we would like to invite anyone who might be witnesses or even who is able to identify the culprits to please bring them forward for law enforcement to take its place. We as Santaco condemn this kind of violence in the strongest possible terms.
Yeah. Do you agree, though, with Vatuka's assessment of how the conditions as they are currently may have led to the violence unfolding as we've seen it? You know, part of what he's arguing here is that there needs to be regulation so that there could be the kind of coexistence that doesn't lead to people's lives being at risk.
Precisely. I agree with him precisely. And also having a chairman who is young, who is, enthusiastic and very encouraging to bringing unity within the taxi space or the transport space, passenger space that involves all small operations such as your small buses, your Ubers, and other taxi-related modes. Definitely, and I agree with him, and I'm sure this will definitely work if it's done properly.
Yeah. Regulation typically means there's a standardization of prices that needs to be factored in. And if that happens, it means someone somewhere in the industry will have to drop their prices so that everyone is on the same playing field. Do you see players in your organization agreeing with that?
Precisely. Now they will agree to that. I think in other cases, such as your KZN, when such things happened, we quickly involved the taxi industry and the people in the Uber or Bolt space, and that brought peace immediately. Hence, I say we need to identify whether this definitely is by taxi industry or by just hooligans from somewhere before we can comment further. However, we will never, condone violence at any given time.
Sure. Vatuka, your parting shot. I mean, Bafana is saying he's hearing about what happened from our news team, actually, suggesting perhaps there may have been a third hand involved here. Does that sound plausible to you?
Yes, I think it is absolutely plausible. My parting shot will simply to say I think the biggest change will result in the youth going to the polls next year in the election. Let us deploy leaders that are willing to create laws that are going to reflect the future we deserve as young people so we can stop being killed in vehicles when we're trying to make an honest living. And yes, most certainly, I don't believe that the traditional transportation industry needs to drop its prices. I think e-hailing needs to up its prices so that the service is correctly priced and we're not competing directly with the Santaco participants and members nationally.
Vatuka Mbelengwa speaks for e-hailing drivers. Also joining us there is Bafana Makakula, the spokesperson for Santaco. To both our guests, thanks very much indeed for your time.